A cold, rainy night in Los Angeles. Los Angeles at night. Neon lights reflect on the wet pavement after a drizzle. The city remains lively, but in the quieter corners, untold stories unfold in silence. At a roadside gas station, cars occasionally pull in, refuel, and quickly leave. The dim station lights cast hazy reflections on the slick ground. The cold and damp air envelops everything. A black SUV rolls in quietly. The door opens. A man steps out. Johnny Depp. He wears a long leather coat, a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his face. Under the faint light, his angular features appear contemplative. This is not a place where people expect to see a Hollywood star. But tonight, he just wants to blend into the darkness, unnoticed. He approaches the pump, pulls out the nozzle, and begins refueling. Light drizzle continues to fall, the night breeze carrying a biting chill. But he doesn't mind. It's just another night. No schedule, no flashing cameras, no one waiting for him. A small sound catches his attention. A few meters away, a heavily pregnant woman stands beside an old car, repeatedly swiping her card at the payment machine. Once, declined. Again, still declined. She frowns, retrieves her wallet, and rummages through a few crumpled bills and some coins. But it doesn't seem to be enough. Johnny silently observes. Inside the car, two small children sit close together. The older girl looks around, 9 years old. The younger boy a little smaller. Their worried eyes stay fixed on their mother. The woman, Isabelle Carter, takes a deep breath. She places a hand on her belly as if to reassure herself, then turns toward the station's cashier. Johnny watches. He says nothing. But one thing is clear. This woman is in trouble. Meeting Isabelle, she has nowhere left to go. Isabelle stands at the counter. Her voice is soft, but she tries to stay composed. "Can I pump just $5 worth?" The cashier looks at her sympathetically, but rules are rules. "Sorry, the minimum amount is $10. Isabelle presses her lips together. $10. A small amount, but at this moment, it's an impossible sum for her. She returns to her car, opens the door, and forces a smile to reassure her children. "Mom, is something wrong?" Lily, the 9-year-old girl, asks. Isabelle grips the steering wheel tightly. "It's okay. We'll figure something out." Her voice remains gentle, but Johnny, standing nearby, recognizes the exhaustion hidden within her words. A brief moment of silence. Then Johnny steps closer. He taps lightly on the car window. Isabelle flinches, but when she sees he doesn't appear threatening, she lowers the window. "Excuse me, but are you all right?" Isabelle hesitates, but Johnny's gaze isn't judgmental or pitiful. There's only genuine concern. I'm fine." Johnny glances inside the car, where the two children sit, shivering from the cold. "It's pretty chilly out here. Would your kids like something warm to drink?" Isabelle freezes. A stranger is offering to help her? She wants to refuse, but when she looks at her son's round, hopeful eyes, she quietly nods. "Thank you. I think they'd like some hot milk." Johnny nods. "All right, let's go." He walks toward the convenience store first. Isabelle hesitates for a moment, then follows. A conversation between Johnny and Isabelle, a past full of loss. Inside the convenience store, the warm lights contrast sharply with the cold outside. The aroma of fresh coffee lingers in the air. Isabelle stands near the counter, clutching the edges of her worn-out coat. Johnny places 2 cups of hot milk on the table. He doesn't say much, simply pushing one toward her. "For the kids." Isabelle nods and accepts it. Lily and Jake eagerly grab their cups, sipping carefully. For the first time that day, Isabelle sees her children smile. Johnny takes a seat, stirring his coffee slowly. "Where are you headed this late?" Isabelle hesitates. She isn't used to confiding in strangers, but something about Johnny makes her feel safe. "I'm on my way to my cousin's house, but I'm not sure if they'll take us in." Johnny raises an eyebrow. "Why not?" Isabelle sighs. "They have their own family. I don't want to be a burden." Johnny nods slightly. "What about your husband?" That question feels like a blade slicing through Isabelle's heart. She takes a deep breath, forcing herself to remain composed. "He left us 3 months ago." Johnny stays silent, listening attentively. Ethan once told me he loved me, but when he found out I was pregnant with our second child, he changed. He said one kid was enough, and then one day he just left, without a word. Isabelle lets out a dry chuckle. All he left behind were some unpaid bills. Johnny sets his coffee cup down. And what did you do after that? Isabelle grips her cup of milk tightly, her gaze distant. I did whatever jobs I could find. Waitressing, dishwashing, cashiering. I took anything that would help me feed my kids. Johnny nods slowly. He doesn't say he understands, but Isabelle can feel that he does. But no matter how hard I worked, it was never enough. Her voice softens. Today I have $10 left. I was going to use it for gas and keep going. But now, I don't know what to do. Johnny remains quiet. After a moment, his deep, steady voice breaks the silence. If you had a chance to start over, would you take it? Isabelle blinks. What do you mean? Johnny pulls a small piece of paper from his coat pocket, writes down an address and slides it toward her. If you want, come here tomorrow morning. Isabelle looks at the paper, then at Johnny. Why are you helping me? Johnny simply smiles. Because everyone deserves a chance. Johnny pays for the gas, but doesn't make Isabelle feel pitied. Isabelle held the cup of warm milk, gently blew on it, then took a sip. The warmth spread down her throat, easing the cold that had seeped into her bones. Lily and Jake were also drinking their milk, their small feet swinging under the chairs, enjoying a rare moment where they didn't have to worry about anything. Johnny sat there, holding his cup of coffee, stirring it slowly. He wasn't in a rush to say anything, nor did he seem overly concerned. Isabelle placed her cup down on the table and looked over at Johnny. Thank you for the milk. Johnny gave a slight nod. It's nothing. After a moment, Isabelle stood up. I need to pay for the gas. Thank you again. She walked over to the cashier, opened her wallet, and checked the little money she had left. But just as she was about to hand over the cash, the store clerk shook his head. Your gas has already been paid for. Isabelle froze. What? The cashier smiled. He took care of it. She turned around and looked at Johnny. He was still sitting there, taking a sip of his coffee as if it was nothing worth mentioning. Isabelle clenched her wallet tightly, feeling a wave of discomfort. She walked over to him. You didn't have to do that. I can handle it myself. Johnny shrugged, his voice calm but firm. It's just a little help. Don't think too much about it. Isabelle bit her lip. She wasn't used to accepting help from strangers. She had always managed on her own, no matter how hard things got. But this time, she glanced at her two children, happily drinking their milk, their eyes no longer filled with worry, like they were just minutes ago. She couldn't refuse. A brief hesitation, then she took a deep breath. Thank you. Really, thank you. Johnny didn't respond, just gave a small nod as if everything was perfectly normal. But for Isabelle, this was the first time in a long while that she felt someone genuinely cared. A painful story, Isabelle shares her past. Isabelle stepped out of the convenience store, the freezing air outside making her shiver slightly. Johnny followed, his hands tucked into the pockets of his coat, his posture relaxed. Lily and Jake were back in the car, leaning against each other, their eyelids slowly drooping as sleep took over. Isabelle stood still for a moment, looking ahead at the road, where the streetlights stretched into the cold, rainy night. Johnny stood beside her, silent. Finally, Isabelle spoke. I used to have a family. Her voice was soft, but it carried a deep weariness. Johnny didn't interrupt. He just listened. Isabelle clasped her hands together. My husband, Ethan, he once told me he would always be there for me. She let out a small laugh, but there was only bitterness in it. When I was pregnant with Lily, he was overjoyed. But when I told him I was expecting a second child, everything changed. Johnny slightly raised an eyebrow. How did it change? Isabelle swallowed. He started becoming distant, coming home late, talking less. When I asked what was going on, he only said it was work pressure. She looked down at the wet pavement, her eyes blurred by the mist in the air. Then one morning I woke up and found a note on the kitchen table. Her voice cracked. It had only one sentence. I can't do this anymore. Johnny remained silent. Isabelle took a deep breath, trying to keep her emotions in check. He left. No goodbye, no phone call, not a single cent left behind. She closed her eyes, gripping the sleeves of her coat tightly. I thought I could manage on my own, but it wasn't that easy. Johnny nodded slightly. And what did you do after that? Isabelle let out a short, joyless laugh. I did whatever jobs I could find. Cleaning offices, washing dishes, serving tables, working night shifts as a cashier. She bit her lip. But no matter how much I worked, it was never enough. Johnny looked at her. There was no pity in his eyes, only understanding. So what are you planning to do now? Isabelle shook her head. I don't know. I'm just trying to get through each day. She turned to Johnny. Why do you care? Johnny was quiet for a few seconds before he spoke softly. Because I know what that feels like. Johnny offers help, but Isabelle hesitates. The rain began to drizzle again. Isabelle tightened her coat, her eyes filled with doubt as she looked at Johnny. You don't know me. Why are you helping me? Johnny shrugged. Do you think I pity you? Isabelle remained silent. Johnny continued. I'm not giving you money. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering you an opportunity. He took a small piece of paper from his coat pocket, wrote down an address, and placed it in Isabelle's hand. Tomorrow morning, if you want, come here. Isabelle looked at the paper, then at Johnny. What is this? Johnny answered calmly. A place that might help you start over. She clutched the paper tightly. And if I don't show up? Johnny gave a small, knowing smile. Then just forget I ever said anything. He adjusted his hat and walked toward his car. Isabelle stood there staring at the paper in her hand, her mind racing with thousands of thoughts. Should she trust him? Should she give this a chance? She didn't know. But for the first time in years, something inside her wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. Isabelle faces a difficult decision. That entire night, Isabelle couldn't sleep. She sat in the car, her eyes fixed on the small piece of paper resting on the dashboard. A simple address, written in neat, steady handwriting. She clenched the paper tightly in her hand. Should she go? For years, she had grown used to empty promises, used to hoping, only to be let down again. Ethan had once promised to always be by her side. Then he disappeared, leaving her to face everything alone. Friends had told her she could rely on them, but when life got hard, they had all gradually walked away. And now a complete stranger was offering her an opportunity. Would this time be different? She glanced at the rearview mirror. Lily and Jake were fast asleep, their gentle breathing filling the cramped space of the car. She took a deep breath. They had suffered enough. She couldn't keep running away. Isabelle gripped the steering wheel tightly. Tomorrow morning she would go, no matter what happened next. A new door opens. The next morning, Isabelle drove to the address Johnny had given her. The road stretched ahead, not too far from the city center, but far enough to offer a sense of peace. She pulled up in front of a small building. A simple wooden sign read, La Petite Maison, a restaurant. Isabelle frowned. She didn't understand what was happening. Through the glass windows, she could see neatly arranged wooden tables and the warm glow of soft yellow lights. As she hesitated, a voice spoke up. Are you Isabelle? She turned around. A middle-aged man with graying hair stood there, wearing a white apron, his hands still dusted with flour. He smiled. I'm Bernard. Johnny told me about you. Isabelle froze. Johnny? Bernard nodded. He said there's someone who needs a fresh start. Isabelle looked at the restaurant. He arranged a job for me? Bernard chuckled lightly. Number. He only provided an opportunity. The rest is up to you. Isabelle remained silent. An opportunity. She looked down at her hands. Hands that had done every kind of job just to survive. Now there was a chance to do something different. She took a deep breath and lifted her head. Where do I start? Bernard smiled and handed her an apron. Do you know how to cook? Isabelle nodded slowly. I used to work in a kitchen, but it's been a long time. Bernard gestured toward the back. Then come on in. We have a lot to do. Isabelle took the apron. She stepped into the restaurant, not realizing that in just a few weeks, this place would become her home. Life changes, a new journey begins. As time passed, Isabelle gradually adjusted to her new life. She worked in the kitchen, learning from Bernard, refining the cooking skills she once thought she had lost. Lily and Jake also began to settle in. No more sleeping in the car. They had warm beds, full meals, and a place to finally call home. Things were getting better. But the most surprising thing was that Isabelle truly loved this job. One day, Bernard placed a stack of papers in front of her. "What do you think about opening a small bakery next to the restaurant?" Isabelle was stunned. "You mean?" Bernard nodded. "You have a talent. Don't let it go to waste." She looked down at the papers, a partnership proposal to open a bakery section. She had never imagined she could own anything. But now, she looked at her hands that had done everything just to survive. Now they could create something meaningful. And she knew she wouldn't let this opportunity slip away. A circle of kindness time passed, and Isabelle's life had completely changed. She was no longer the desperate woman standing in the rain at a gas station. Now she was a real chef, co-owner of a small bakery next to La Petite Maison restaurant. Every morning before the city fully awakened, she was already in the kitchen, kneading dough, baking pastries, carefully arranging each piece on display. The aroma of freshly baked bread filled the air, drawing in the first customers of the day. Lily and Jake had settled into their new lives. They went to school regularly, no longer worried about sleeping in a car or skipping meals. Everything was different now, but most importantly, Isabelle had found herself again. Isabelle becomes the one who gives opportunities. One afternoon, as Isabelle was cleaning the kitchen counter, a young girl walked into the shop. She looked hesitant, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "Are you hiring?" Isabelle looked at her. Messy hair, tired eyes. She looked exactly like Isabelle from the past. She knew this look, the look of someone who had endured too much but still held on to a sliver of hope. Isabelle put down her towel and stepped closer to the girl. "Do you know how to cook?" The girl hesitated, then softly said, "I've never worked in a restaurant, but I'm willing to learn." Isabelle smiled. "Then step into the kitchen. I'll teach you." She didn't need to ask about the girl's past. She didn't need to know what she had been through, because Isabelle understood better than anyone. Sometimes a person just needs one chance to start over. And now she was the one to give that chance. Johnny returns. One last time. One late afternoon, when the restaurant had quieted down after the rush, Johnny walked in. He looked exactly as he did the first time Isabelle met him. A leather jacket, a wide-brimmed hat, and a quiet smile. Isabelle saw him and was surprised. "Are you here to check on me again?" Johnny chuckled lightly. "No need. I already know you're doing great." He pulled out a chair and sat down. "One tarte tatin, please." Isabelle laughed and walked into the kitchen. "You won't be disappointed." A few minutes later, she placed the pastry on the table and sat across from Johnny. He cut a piece, took a bite, and ate in silence. Then he nodded. "Perfect." Isabelle smiled, but deep inside, she felt something different. "You've done too much for me." Johnny set his fork down and looked at her. "I didn't do anything. You did it all yourself." He stood up, took out his wallet, and left some money on the table. Then he placed an extra bill beside it. "Use the rest to help someone else." Isabelle looked at the bill, then back at Johnny. She didn't say anything, just nodded, because she knew he was right. Kindness shouldn't stop with one person. It has to continue, like a never-ending circle. Johnny smiled, then walked out of the restaurant. Isabelle watched him go, knowing that she might never see him again. But that didn't matter, because he had changed her life, and now it was her turn to change someone else's life. What we can learn from this story: kindness can change an entire life. Johnny didn't do anything grand. He simply helped Isabelle when she needed it the most. A small action, but it completely transformed her life and her children's lives. Sometimes you don't have to do something big. A little attention, a little help at the right time can make a huge difference in someone's life. Don't just help someone in the moment. Give them an opportunity to stand on their own. Johnny didn't give Isabelle money. He didn't pity her. He simply gave her an opportunity, and she turned it into a whole new life. Think about this in your daily life. Can you give someone an opportunity? Maybe a job referral? Maybe a little support at the right time? A small action, but it can change everything. When you receive an opportunity, take it and make it worthwhile. Isabelle could have refused. She could have continued struggling, refusing to trust anyone. But she took a chance, and that's why her life changed. If you ever receive an opportunity, don't let fear hold you back. Take it. Make it something meaningful. Kindness is a never-ending circle. Isabelle's story is not a miracle. It's just an example of how kindness can change a life. You don't have to be Johnny Depp to do this. You just need to be someone who cares about others. If you can help someone, do it. If you are in a situation like Isabelle's, remember that there is always a way forward. You just need one opportunity. And when you stand strong again, keep passing that opportunity forward to others. Because kindness is not just a single act, it's a circle that never ends.